Hey there, fellow creators. Ben here from Cinder Studios, and welcome back to How I Make a Painting Part 3. We're actually picking up a brush today, so stick around. So it's been a couple of weeks since Part 2, and I do apologize for not getting back to this sooner, but we're here and ready to go, and this prepped canvas that I had sketched out and tinted already, we're ready to paint on. So at this point in time, it's usually just the fun stuff. So we already got the sketch of the color concept, which is back on my monitor over here for a reference. I also have the original thumbnail sketch out as well to reference for detail work. And so at this point, it's just about finding what colors I want. So I'll turn around and head to my shelf and see what I'm thinking about for color. So for every one of my tubes of paint, I actually put a little bit of that color on the cap because I lay them down like this so I can just turn around and see what all of those colors are at a glance. Because we're focusing a lot on sort of browns, grays, and sort of pinks, a little bit of oranges, probably more in the later side of things. It's a relatively dark piece with some, it's almost grayscale, but it's got just a little bit of a color hint. So I'm thinking about some cad red. I'll need something to tone everything down a little bit with, so I'm probably mostly just going to be grabbing some of my used paint mixes in the jars on the table. Gray it out. I'll probably mix with some green for some browns. I've got chromium oxide green dark, which I've been using this color a lot lately. I really enjoy it. And just for the sake of some variety, I've got a cobalt turquoise that I really like that I picked up recently as well. And I think that'll be a decent start. Okay, so as always, for any given painting session of mine, I have the canvas, I've got my regular glass palette out, and my bucket of warm water off to the side. You guys aren't going to see that, but it's over there, just so you know. I'm reaching way over, past the palette. That's what I'm doing, as I'm dipping my brush in the water. So I'll start out by just laying out this color here. So I'll get a couple of blobs, nothing huge. This isn't a giant canvas or anything. I just want a little bit of color to work with. So about the size of a coin of some kind, fairly common, like a nickel or a quarter, probably a little less than a quarter size. And I'll get those two greens out to mix with. A lot of people will put their colors in a specific order, like rainbow order or warms and cools, stuff like that. And while that does tend to save on palette space, I just kind of put them wherever I feel like it. I'm not really worried about that. I also want to lay out a decent amount of white because we have this real bright section in the center. I got a big jar of white for that. Probably didn't need fresh white. I got a used white I could have grabbed, but hey, that's thing for another day. And then one of my used paints, and I've got a few grays. This one actually needs stirred. In the used paint mixes, just whatever's left on my palette after I'm sort of done painting for the day. All those leftovers get scraped into a jar, agitated and mixed every few batches of whatever. And what you end up with is this beautiful gray color. There are certain paint companies that will sort of make something like this where it's just their leftovers. But I find that, what's the point of buying your own when you can make your own? And I've got some of them that are more gray. I have one that's more brown. I specifically say no white because I know white's going to make everything gray. So this one is just colored without white, so it makes a nice brown. And it's usually if I'm painting trees, this is the first thing I'm reaching for. Which is just my pre-mixed brown. Okay, so that should be enough to start. Let me have a quick look back at my reference again. Okay, so the first bit of painting I do is always base coats. So it's not going to be necessarily the final color of paint. I'm searching around for what kind of brush I want to grab. I'm going to grab a little bright here. And I probably won't be using any huge brushes. I can't imagine I'll go much wider than this for the entire piece. So, yeah. So I'm going to start with a little bit of knife work, too, because I want to mix up whatever I'm thinking for this pink. I might even grab a little orange here, too. I've got, this will probably be good. The high flow quinacridone nickel azo gold. Just a couple of drops of that in that mix. So I don't want it to be like really pink. Get a little bit of that gray. It's not bad. It's a real low tinting green. Yeah, it's a little bit more muted than that. A little more orange. In the first initial mix here is really just finding, and sometimes it's finding a sky color. In this case, we don't really have a sky; we just have a light source. That's pretty good. So that's a little more of a peachy color. And I'll do a couple more batches of that, but lighter. So I get a nice soft gradient with it. Here and here. Like so. All right. I think I can afford to start slapping some of this down now. So at this point, yeah, I'm just covering the base canvas. I'd be covering the white at this point, but I'm going to do my best to keep the canvas flat and centered, but you guys have to bear with me because I do want to, still make a painting. And this is my process anyway. So, yeah, just fairly loose. I'll thin with water a bit just to cover that. But it's the cover it is also, but I want to make sure I can still, at least in the first few stages, still see some of my sketch. And because I tinted this canvas, I do actually enjoy the fact that you are going to be able to see a little bit of that red coming up underneath. It's not a huge deal, but being able to really kind of start grabbing that and but also seeing that underneath the brush strokes is nice as well. Wipe some of that off on my pants because I got a little too much on my brush. That gradient out on top. Looks pretty good. Move my rag up here too. And then just the pure white for that higher contrast because it'll be dark on this side right next to that. So. Now when I come in and do the next layer to this, when this starts to dry, I'll actually pull this out a little. I'm pretty sure I was playing with doing some sun rays, but that's very, very late in the process. Today we're just playing with that first layer and seeing where some of our basic shapes are. Okay, that's a good start. Grab my knife again. I want to mix. Wow, that's already dry. Just get a little. Okay. Clear that out. So I'm going to take that same pink that we're working with, maybe add just a touch more of the red, and I'll start building this gray color for the walls. Base pinkish gray color. Because this was a store-bought canvas, it's a little bit smoother than what I'd be doing on one of my own home stretched ones here. So I can afford to use a little less paint and a little bit more water, so I can spread that around a lot more. Edge, that. I'm going to do my best to not cut this video up a ton, but I it is one of those things where it's like I literally cannot just sit and have a 4-hour recording of me painting, because that would be nuts. And there are going to be moments where I will have to like really lean over this and put my head in front of it. So I'll probably either have to A, move the camera, or B, just cut that part of the recording and explain it later. Again, this is just essentially an underpainting, what I'm doing now. You don't necessarily have to like do an underpainting for acrylics. It's definitely more of an oil and traditional oil technique to do an underpainting, but I do find that adding the extra layers early really helps you build up a little more complex color later. As long as I still have enough viable paint, though, because I didn't mix a ton here. You see how little paint I'm working with. I want to be sure that I get this covered as well, or at least placed. The angle is really off. Where am I at with my shapes here? This comes in and down like that, so. If you guys missed part 2, you'll know that I said basically I said my pen or my paint marker sketch is really just a guideline. It's not there to be like paint by number. I have to do that line. No, it's just there to kind of give me an idea, and I'm gonna be covering up to the point where that original sketch is pretty much not gonna be completely gone, and it's gonna be within this first layer. There's a lot of freedom in not limiting yourself to just painting the lines you established ahead of time. It's really allows you to be more freeform and find shapes and story and stuff in the piece as you're working. Okay, a little bit more of the dark. Here, what I could do. Obviously, I can't do anything till that dries, so. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, acrylics dry really fast, acrylics dry really fast. It's still wet. Like, I literally cannot layer on top of this now until it dries. So, yeah, grab that, a little more red in here. Start building out the other shapes. And it's just, I'm darkening it basically just to distinguish and delineate that difference in the layers. And for the most part, I'm not actually looking at the color sketch. I'm looking at my original ink sketch, because that has more accuracy to the line work that I'm going for than the color sketch did. The color sketch is just there for color reference. That's literally it. Yes, all of that line, the detail work there, yeah, covering all that up. Now, one thing I will do as I work is start to establish those same lines just with the thickness of the paint. It's sort of my way of keeping those shapes intact. So like I'll, move my brush like this to keep the idea of where those lines were, and then again switching the direction of my strokes in order for me to still remember what that was without having to preserve the sketch. It also serves a little bit twofold in that purpose as well. The more I can establish in thicker brushwork, the less I have to work later. I can just let the dry brushing take effect over that shape and those brush lines, which will be more apparent the further down the road we get here. Thin that a little for this section. Doesn't need to be real thick. And as I mentioned before, this is already just a very simple design. It's basically just 3 layers. So there's not a lot to this. Again, perspective lines, that's something we can put into the wet paint as well. But this whole piece is a lot more on the simple side compared to some of the other stuff that I've done in the past, which is why I think it works well for a video, but not necessarily for to say like, here, this is how I do every piece, because some pieces are a lot more complicated. But this sketch just seemed to happen to fit well and work well for this, so that's what we went with. Okay, darker, better. This is more in front. I want to put this here more. This is here, that's there. This is behind it. Up and down. Oh, this went all the way up, didn't it? Yeah, okay, hang on. Yeah, this goes all the way up through the top of the piece. That's what's going on here. Oh, see, like, I've already lost that sketch, so it's just, now I can kind of make things up a little bit based on how things are flowing. Did want to play with a little bit more brown here, so I'll grab that. I'll grab a little bit of that turquoise as well for the first time and mix that in. For this shape, big boulder. That looks pretty good. Again, I will be going back over these shapes again with more paint, so everything you're seeing is not the final coat. It's just the underpainting. It's just that base layer. All right, last bit of this. That foreground element is probably going to be mostly almost black. So I got probably not enough in here. Got basically none in there. Cool. Got used paint black only, and it's empty. All right. Actually, want to pull these onto another smaller palette because I don't want to disturb the white here. Set that aside for a second. Just a little black and mix it in with that gray. Red. I'll throw that turquoise in there as well. Just another shade darker than that layer. So we have the light coming in, the wall, this, and then the main foreground. So it's like 4 layers, I guess, then. At least in terms of main color elements. This is just a big arc. Like so. And if you note, I've been doing all of this with the same single brush. I'm not worried about switching this, that, whatever. It's the joy of a good bright or a flat brush, is you can do literally everything with one. At least for a piece like this. Blocky rock shapes and such. Still thinking about those perspective lines, just again brushing those straight into the wet paint. There, can even think a little bit about shadow with the darker layer I have here. Thin it out a bit. One there, one here, one there, on the back side of them. Had a shape like that in there, that edge. About like that. I feel pretty good about that. Again, we're still seeing a little bit of that red showing through from that original glaze, mostly right in here. I'll probably be doing my best to preserve a bit of that for the rest of the piece. But that is pretty much just the first layer. Now, at this point, I'm going to stop. I'm going to actually go ahead and call this one an episode for the week, because this is just the underpainting part of this. It's very simple, easy step. As you can see, we did this in about 20 minutes or so. So it's certainly time-consuming, but it's a quick process. And like, again, once we establish some of that color, block in those shapes, everything from here on out is going to be way easier. So I've essentially established what I did in the original thumbnail sketch of just blocking out shape and value. Again, in the digital version as well. And so now I can really just start refining that down further from this point forward. But that will be happening in part 4. So for the time being, this needs to dry. Now in my own studio, in any given day, in any given project, I usually have at least one other project to work on. Although knowing me, I usually have like 6 other projects to work on. So while this is drying, I will certainly jump over to something else. But for the time being, that's a different painting for a different day. So for the first part of the actual painting process here, that's the underpainting. That's where I start for every single piece. Now I do want to make note, I probably should have mentioned this at the top of the episode here, but this painting is an original of mine. And while you're welcome to employ these techniques and study the work, do not copy this painting. This is an exploration of technique and how I do my work, not a one-to-one guide of how to create a forgery. So, yeah. So that was part 3 about underpainting. If you guys enjoyed this, be sure to hit the like button, get subscribed if you're not already. Check me out on socials in the description box below, including the community Discord, where you can talk about the art process a bit further with other passionate creators. And yeah, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks for part 4. So this has been Cinder Studios reminding you to keep on creating, and I will see you guys next time.